the biggest and most common mistakes that professional photographers make is not specializing in a specific genre of photography. In this video, I'm going to discuss 4 reasons as to why it's so important. My name is Pi, and I'm one of the founders of Lynn and Jersa Photography and SLRLounge.com. We're teaming up with Adorama to bring you a new series of photography tutorials called Master Your Craft right here on Adorama TV. So let's dive in. What's up, friends? My name is Pi. Welcome to Adorama TV. Let's get right into this. This video is a follow-up to David Bergman's video where he asks and answers the question, general or specialty photography. Within that video, which I'd recommend you all check out, David goes on to kind of discuss the different standpoints, whether you're a hobbyist, whether you're a professional, and he basically concludes with, well, if you're a professional, he would highly suggest you to specialize in a specific genre of photography. That's where we're going to pick up and carry forward this conversation because I 1000% agree with this. In fact, I would say that if you want to be a professional photographer, I'm not just suggesting that you specialize. I'm going to say that it's a must, that it's almost impossible to get to the highest level of this craft if you don't have a specialty. Let's go into 4 reasons why. And quick note, I'm going to save the biggest and most important reason, one that you might not necessarily think about, for very last, because I want to build my way into it. I also want you guys to stick around. So let's get to point number 1. You might not be as good as you think you are. And I don't mean you specifically, I mean photographers in general. See, when I typically meet someone who's a generalist, their mindset is, well, I want to be able to shoot all these different things because I want to open up my potential audience, my potential clients even further. Not only is this reasoning wrong, and I'm going to talk about that at the end, but what I tend to notice is that within their portfolios, I usually see images that are decent, but they're not really at the level of someone that's specializing in each of those genres. This is very natural, actually. In fact, in psychology, this is known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. And you've probably all experienced it. I know I have. It's basically where if you approach something with limited experience, we tend to have a little bit more confidence than we probably should in that thing. And then once we start learning about that thing, we begin to realize how much more there is to go. And the funny thing is, as you start getting good at photography, that's actually when the imposter syndrome begins to set in, because you start realizing that despite what you know, well, there's so much more that you don't. Now, this process of growth never really ends, but for a generalist, not only do they often think that they're better than they actually are, they're not as good as they need to be in order to compete against the best. Now, this brings me to point number 2, which is your time and resources are limited. It can take decades just to master a single genre of photography. And those that have spent a decade plus in that genre will tell you that they're still learning. It's still a process that they believe will probably go to the day that they die. They'll still be improving each and every day. Now, this isn't to say that you have to be a master. You have to spend a decade in a specific genre before you can start making money. But it does take a couple years. For some, it might be shorter. They might be extremely talented and get there in a few months. But most, probably 2 to 3 years before they can start developing a product and skill set that has enough value to be worth paying for. So as a generalist, how do you do this if you have 4 or 5 different focuses? It becomes virtually impossible. In fact, if you wanted to get each of these areas to a level that you can actually, charge money for, it might take a decade, 2 to 3 years split between each of these different areas. But the thing is, most of you that want to be professionals don't have a decade to wait and just develop before you start making money. So specializing is going to be the quickest way for you to develop the skill set and product that you need to start generating revenue. Now, this brings me to point number 3. You need to compare yourself and realize that you're competing against other specialists, not other generalists. See, generalists, they tend to think and compare their work against other people that are kind of doing the same thing, other average professional photographers or other professional photographers that are also generalists. What they fail to recognize is that that's not the way clients search. Clients are going to compare their work against the specialists, and the generalist actually has to compete against someone that specializes in each specific field. To understand this, I want you to take the perspective of the client, and specifically, it's a client looking for wedding photography. I'm going to take on the role of a generalist. So I'm the one that shoots weddings, but I also do family work, and those two things are kind of similar. But on my website, you see that I also do editorial work, I do fashion work, I do corporate headshots, corporate events, I do everything. Now, you, as the client, why would you hire me unless my wedding work was just so far beyond everybody else when you could hire someone that spends all their time in wedding photography? Let's say, for example, a studio like Lynn and Jersa Photography, or let's say a photographer like Vanessa Joy, who's also a friend on the channel. See, these are studios and photographers that focus 100% of their time in that specific area. And it's very likely that they're also going to be producing better work because me as the generalist, I'm split between all of these things. In the same way, let's say you're a client looking for an architectural photographer. Why would you hire me as a generalist who does real estate, architecture, automotive, corporate headshots, corporate events, when you can hire someone like my friend, Mike Kelly, who literally has made an entire career doing nothing but architectural work? Now, this is where I want to go back to points 1 and 2, that you might not be as good as you think you are, and your time and resources are limited because the client is going to compare your work to specialists, and they don't really care that you do other things. What they care about is that they get the best thing that they're looking for. How difficult will it be for you to compete with any number of specialists who spend all of their time developing and honing that craft? But on top of that, they have a head start. They've been doing this 5, 10, 20 years before you got into the industry. Your time, though, is split between multiple different areas. And that makes not only developing the skill set very difficult, but catching up virtually impossible. Now, this brings me to the final and the most important point, which you might not tend to think about. Number 4 is that marketing for a generalist is virtually impossible. And I'm going to explain why. Let's just say for right now that as a generalist, you are as good as every specialist in the genres that you choose to shoot, okay? There is no specialist that can create better photography than you in those areas. So basically, we've solved points 1 through 3. That's not an issue, right? Then you get to the final one. How do you market your services? If you specialize, it's relatively easy. And I say relatively because marketing is challenging in and of itself, but it's 10 times easier when you have a specific specialty, a focus, right? Because if I land on a wedding photographer's website, it can say wedding photography, maybe based in a certain location. I know exactly the types of images to show because I know who my clients are. They're brides and grooms. So I'm going to show wedding related images and I'm going to show things that they would be interested in. When it comes to the articles on that website, let's say, for example, the Lynn and Jersa website, I can pull up and create resources that are directed right towards that specific client. I can add value to their lives because I know who they are and I know where they are in this process. But I can also create the right types of social media content, the right types of short videos that dial directly into their needs. Now, let's say that we're a generalist. Thing is, we're a generalist that's so good, we're exceptional at everything we do. That's not a problem. The question is, what do you put on your website? What do you say that you actually do? If you do, let's say, automotive and architectural and real estate and all these different areas, right? You do all these different types of corporate photography. Which image do you showcase on the front of the website? Because any image that you show is going to turn away all the rest of them. So whatever you pick, you're like, man, I got to pick something that communicates to all these people. But the thing is, it's impossible to communicate to all those people. What do you even say that you do on that website? What kind of copy do you create? Because you can't just say that I'm a real estate photographer or an architectural because you also do more. So do you put them all together? What kind of copy do we create? And when it goes to articles that we need to create, when we're blogging, when we're creating for social media, which one of these images is going to speak to every one of these people? Now, here's the truth. Most professional photographers think that by specializing, they are limiting the potential customers that they can speak to. In reality, it's the exact opposite. The more things that you do, the more narrow your potential client base gets. When you speak to one specific person, when you have a focus, you can speak to all of those people that have that particular need. But when you say that I do real estate photography, I also do editorial, I also do corporate, I also do headshots, I want you to think of this from the client's perspective. They're not hearing that, oh, this person can do this, as well as this, as well as this, and this. What they're hearing is, if I need real estate and commercial work and wedding photography and fashion and editorial, then I should go to this person. But I don't need all those. I just need this. So I'm just going to go find someone that focuses in that one thing. As a generalist, it's virtually impossible to create a marketing strategy and message that's going to communicate to your target audience because the audience is too broad. Now, I say virtually impossible because I'm sure one of you out there has an example of a success story as a generalist, and that's fine. What I'm saying is I don't know a single one. I'm saying that despite over 10 years in this industry, I don't know a single generalist who's reached the same level of success as those who specialize within their genre. Now, if you're an SLR Lounge Premium member, we're going to continue this conversation within the content library as this all relates to the business training system. It's a training system that literally takes you from A to Z in creating a 6 or 7-figure photography studio of your dreams from scratch. Until next time, you can find me at Pi Jirsa. Peace.